How you doing, YouTube? Matt Massa Beer Reviews back with... It's been a while since I've had one of these, man. Kind of like... Getting a little teary-eyed because it's been that long. And that'd be LaTrappe Quad Oak-Aged Trappe Stale. Now, I've talked about I've reviewed, I think, several vintages of this beer. But it's been a very, very long time since I've had anything from these guys. At least in the oak-aged editions. For specifically one reason, they're mad expensive. They've always been pricey. They've always been like, okay, you know, for a bottle like this, it's been typically when I would buy them previously, at least 19 to 20 bucks, if not more. And they've just gotten more and more expensive over time. They started putting them in fancy boxes, and now you're looking at 30 and change for one of these. So I'm just not, as much as I love them, I just don't, you know, it's a lot, especially for, what is this, 500 milliliter, I believe. Yeah, 500 mil. So I had to go to Pennsylvania to get my hair cut, and I stopped by a beer distributor in Pennsylvania called Shangy's. They're quite popular. They have 1 billion different kinds of beer. Well, not billion, but like 3,000 plus or whatever the hell it is. And I go into the kind of Euro section, vintage section, Belgian section, I guess you'd say, and go watch my video. I did like a walkthrough and all that kind of stuff when I did my trip video for when I picked this beer up, and they had several of these batches, $11.50 a bottle, which is like half price. I'm like, okay. They had several different batches. This is batch 7. You're not going to be able to read it because the batch rolls off into the brown there a little bit, but I assure you it's batch 7. And I'm pumped to dive into this sucker. They talk about the oak aging program here and what they do, and it's just about quadruple matured in small barrels and what yada yada yada. But the cool thing about LaTrappe and their barrel aging program, which I think is one of the best in the world, to give you a little bit of preface here, you can actually go on their website and you can read about the batches, individual batches, and they give you all the information about it, which is one of my favorite things about this beer. So I have it up right now. It says batch 7. It says batch 7 is the first batch of 2 to mature in old whiskey barrels. These barrels come from various whiskeys distilleries, including Balmore, Tamadou, Strathspey, and Laphroaig. Islay Scotch, and maybe that other one, Strathspey, sounds like a Speyside Scotch. But anyway, it says the aromas of the whiskeys have a clear influence on the final taste. This taste is remarkably different from the other previous batches. Peat and roasted are most present, so that makes me think Islay Scotch, while wood tannins from the wood are less clearly recognizable, but the warming effect in combination with the full, strong taste that the whiskey barrels have given to the already beautiful quadruple makes this batch perhaps the most tasteful brewed to date. To date is very important here because this was made 10 years ago. June 2011. It is June. Actually, no, it's July. I'm lying. It's over a year, technically. It's July 4th. You might hear fireworks going off. So this is, you know, a spot on 10 years, you know. And for those who don't know, back in the end of the aughts, the beginnings of the teens, there was a cork shortage. So that's called a synthetic cork. These are typically a red-hot nightmare to get out. I don't think I have a wine key back here. They're the worst to get out. Okay. We're going to have the brute force strength, this sucker. Yeah, I might have to get a wine key. I can't even get a grip on the goddamn thing. These are by far and away the worst. Ooh, let's try this. I should just saber the goddamn thing. Probably be easier, but I don't think I'm allowed to saber beers inside the house. God damn it, why don't I have a wine key back here? Let's try, see if I can. There we go. See, I knew that. I love this bottle opener. There we go. That should do it. Okay, perfect. So I don't have to get a wine key now. So, yeah, there was a cork shortage. I think it, like I said, late teens, early 2000s. Because I think it was because of TCA which is a disease you get in corks that kind of ruin a lot of wine. You know, wine drives the boat when it comes to corks. There we go. That was a little hiss so you could see how annoyingly long these rubberized synthetic corks are. I'm kind of up in the air as far as ageability with these things, so we'll see how this comes off. Now, full disclosure. Well, you know what? These beers are notorious for not having great carbonation to begin with, so I'm not going to get too hot and bothered about the lack of carb on that. Label-wise, it's what LaTrappe does. Beer-wise, I mean, it looks like the Quad, but without much carbonation. I mean, it's an 11-year-old beer, synthetic cork. You know, you do the math on that. Not necessarily means it's a negative beer, but we'll see what's what. What was I going to say? I forget. So, yeah, really little to no carbonation. Let's get a nose. That smells awesome. That smells really awesome. There's this fruitiness to this. And it's all whiskey derived. You know, think about this. You think about it as Scotch barrels. You know, you think about the peat smokiness, all that kind of stuff. While I get that rich red fruitiness is more attributed to bourbon than Scotch, it can be there in Scotch, and it's really coming through with this. Now, this is a Belgian quad. Rich red fruits tend to be a note that's kind of typical for quads. But you have to understand, we're dealing with the LaTrappe quad here. Very banana forward. Like one of the most banana forward quads of any quad. So you're getting more of a rich red fruit. That whiskey's coming through really nice. It actually is coming off a little bit more like a, and I've said this before about some of the LaTrappe vintages, a little bit more kind of barley wine, a little bit more English barley wine, a little bit more Thomas Hardy-esque as far as nose goes. Man, it's rich. Caramel, date, figgy, not getting to raisinette, but it's this huge chocolate-covered figginess with this nice kind of red fruit spirit to it. It is rich. It is rich. It is decadent. It is definitely a dessert beer. Let's dive in. Cheers. Okay. So the nose is way better than the actual taste on this thing. And you definitely know you're drinking a Scotch barrel when you actually drink this. I didn't get much as far as that aggressive when I talk about Scotch. I mean this in a positive light, but Scotch comes off a lot to me like Band-Aidy. It's the best way I can kind of talk about how Scotch comes off. Now on the nose here, it was more of that rich chocolate and kind of like a red bourbon fruitiness to it. It definitely has that kind of slightly Band-Aidy thing, more specifically when you're talking about your Islay Scotches. You know, your peat mossy Band-Aidy thing is very, very aggressive on that side of things. At least for me, I'm more of a Speyside guy, which is more like a banana leather thing kind of going on. This has that little Band-Aidy thing. Definitely has that kind of peat mossiness. Lack of carbonation is doing it dirty. Because I think if it was carved, it'd be a much more explosive beer. There's nice kind of charry chocolate, nice smokiness to it, nice charriness to it. I mean, the quad is still there. It has this nice kind of rich kind of, what you'd expect from a quad, like a bready kind of meal in a glass kind of thing going on with this nice kind of sweetness that's kind of propped up probably both from the spirit but also from that Belgian candied sugar. It's just the lack of carb is really what's doing it. There's oxidation here. I don't think it's anything overtly criminal. When you kind of bring in that kind of peat moss Band-Aidy thing I get from a lot of those highlight scotches, it's kind of hard for me to differentiate where the oxidation begins and ends. Because there was just some kind of aggressive things that kind of bisect those kind of flavors for me when it comes to oxidation, so it's hard for me to detect. It really is the lack of carbonation here that does this beer an absolute disservice. Because I think if there was a decent carbonation here, that this beer would be much more uplifting, much more drinkable. It just comes off more like still beer to me. Not a negative. I like me some still beer. But you could taste where this beer would have been like absolutely 100% stellar if it had carbonation. Now I'm curious. Is there a reason why they're half price? You know, a lot of the vintages that they had there, I had actually kind of reined myself in. I want to say I want to say they probably had 10 to 15 of these older batches for relatively cheap prices. I was like, fuck it. I ain't gonna buy them all. But I was like, no, because you don't have all the money in the world. And you're talking about if I just bought those, I'm looking at $200 just for these. Not gonna happen. I said you're allowed. I limited myself to 3 bottles. And what I did was, here's my little secret for y'all out there. I don't use Untapped. I mean, if you follow me on Untapped, you know I don't use Untapped. But I use it for one specific reason. I never go on there to see if a beer's a good beer. Like, if it's got, like, a good rating. I don't do that. I don't care. Because I want to go into a beer with my own opinion. I don't want to be influenced by anything else. What I do is I go on Untapped to see if beers are sideways. Aged beer. That's what I go on Untapped for. So I ripped it on tap, and real quick, I was like, okay. I picked up a bunch of vintages. I was like, let me look. And I just skimmed through, like, the first 20 or 30 people and of recents. And if nobody's giving it, like, horrific marks, then I'm like, okay, it's probably not sideways. Because you're talking about a barrel-aged quad with a lot of moving parts, it could probably go sideways. As long as it's not sour or sideways. Carbonation aside, I was like, okay, I'll grab this one. And I'm curious to see where the other ones land, because they're all synthetic corks. I think that actually has a lot to do with it. But I also think you're talking about batch 7 here. You're talking about, LaTrappe was kind of leading the way when it comes to kind of barrel aging Trappist ale. I mean, I think they're the first. I'm sure people did it prior to them, but as far as a larger scale that was produced and distributed throughout the world, they were definitely one of the first. And with all that being said, with the carbonation being completely gone and an oxidation that's not horrible on this, but some people might find a little bit not optimal, I think this is still really tasty. Listen, I'm a romantic when it comes to aged beer, so I can find the best things in some aged beer. And I'm not going to tell you this is the best LaTrappe quad that I've had. Oak aged one. Had much better. Batch 16. Best of all time. I'm curious to see. I was hoping they had one there so I could revisit it. But it's tasty. It's fun. And I'm glad I bought it. Let's put it that way. For $11.50 to taste this beer and to experience that journey, even though it's not optimal because of the lack of carbonation, still a very, very fun beer. And an absolutely bonkers nose. Absolutely bonkers. You could huff this and get your money's worth out of it. So, yeah, fun beer. Let's talk about it. It's one of the better barrel-aged beers I've had. It's like, we'll put it in a conversation, but it's not towards the top because of that lack of carbonation. It's one of the better, barrel-aged quads that I've had as late. It would be the same thing. Yeah, I'll put it in, but not towards the top. It's just that lack of carbonation just prevents it from being next level. I'm not going to get too angry at it. Value and availability on this thing, like I said, typically $20 plus, but $11.50. No problem with that. And picked it up off a shelf. Like I said, more often than not, these cost arm and legs, so that kind of sucks, but they can be found. Maybe not this old of a batch, but and leave you with, I feel like, what we like this. I feel like old beer. That's it. Yeah, I think you really have to kind of dig old beer to get down with this. So if you dig old beer, you'll dig this. So there you go. Reviewing the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Down there if you want to talk about it. Massive Beers if you want to check me out doing the social media stuff. Beer Massive if you want to check me out doing the whole podcasting thing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Hopefully enjoying a little bit of LaTrappe right now. We'll see you next time. Cheers.